Here with Claire Cannon, and she's going to talk us through her recent research on identity foreclosure. But before we do that, Claire, can you just tell us a bit about your background and how you ended up here?
Yeah, of course. I'm a vocal coach. I trained as a singer, so I went to theatre school and I wanted to go down that route. And then about 11 years ago, I decided to retrain to teach and just fell in love with teaching and coaching. Um, and I just went through a series of self-propelled education, I guess, with different certifications and things. And I saw quite a few times this master's program, and I kind of thought about it and then decided, no, it's too big, it's too big for me. And then I just thought, let's just do it. I wanted to challenge myself. And that's how I decided to jump on and elevate my studies.
Yeah, and you've obviously done a series of projects. Have they all been interconnected before we get to this final one, or have you kind of dotted about different areas of your practice?
Yeah, unintentionally, they've all been interconnected. The first project was around the 6 areas of work life, because I was really intentionally looking at doing something that was more, I guess, holistic, less positivist. I knew I didn't want to work with statistics because it's not something that I was really kind of that I thought I'd be very good at, I guess. And I enjoy words and I enjoy feelings and I enjoy talking to people and emotions and trying to figure out things like that. So, um, and I stumbled across burnout, and I I work both in a college environment and privately with professional singers, and I was seeing a lot of my professional singers were going through a lot of maybe kind of mental health things or burnout or fatigue with their voice, and it really made me wonder how maybe we can understand why musicians may be more subject to burnout, and ideally try and figure out a way to teach that from early education, early musicians education. So it was something that just hit me in the face, I think, when I started initially researching, and then I've built on top of with each project that I've done, I've kind of built on top of that premise of with burnout as the foundational um, element, I guess.
Yeah, which led you to your final project where you look at identity foreclosure, which is a really fascinating concept. Can you tell us about that concept before we move on to your project?
Yeah, so identity foreclosure was something that I'd never heard of at all. But again, I wanted to look into mental health, and my objective was to kind of try and understand why musicians are showing up in so much of the literature as having, mental health issues that are way more prominent in this area for musicians. So I looked into identity. Passion was the first one of the things that I did a project on about passion, and identity was just coming up and coming up and coming up. So I knew for this project I wanted to look at identity, and it was only in looking at them kind of back when Erickson was looking into identity, and he spoke about the life stages and how at each stage of life we have a conflict. And in adolescence, that conflict was identity and kind of foreclosure. And he proposed that when in adolescence, we need to be able to have challenges to our identity and maybe kind of go down different routes with our identity and try different hats on and see who we are, so that when we progress into adulthood, we've already had that conflict. But the premise of identity foreclosure is that we don't go through that. So we someone in adolescence will become really tied to an identity, and they don't have that conflict, and the identity is never challenged. In fact, it's quite often encouraged, so that when we grow up into adulthood and that identity is challenged, it can be really quite devastating to the mental health. And it kind of hit me in the face a little bit of, oh, that makes, I mean, on the surface it makes sense. So I really wanted to look into that and see if the literature supported it, but also if I could design a study that would kind of either support it or work in the opposite and give me another route to follow maybe going forward.
And so you focused mod 6 on that, and you've got really distinct research questions that you were looking at. So tell me how you took that understanding of foreclosure into developing research around it.
Well, I wanted to basically see if it was a thing that was prominent in musicians. So, it's a mod 6, so you don't have a lot of time when it comes to a study, but my idea was to, kind of set up a 2-stage project where I could do a questionnaire initially and just see how people reacted to their identity, and asking questions based around their identity in adolescence. And the results, I mean, off the top of my head, I can't remember all the questions, but it was essentially like, did you spend most of your time in music, or did you have any other hobbies? And it was basically just asking musicians who are professional musicians now, so it was aimed at working musicians, what their adolescent experiences were with music. And kind of overwhelmingly, my respondents all came back with that basically they decided in adolescence that that's what they were going to do, and they'd put everything into it, which I also did alongside that, like psychological well-being, like use the psychological well-being tool to see where everyone stood, and again it was kind of shockingly quite low in mental health. So my results initially were coming back as, I had a lot of respondents that were saying that they were fully dedicated to being a musician from very early, yet they were also supporting the other literature that says that, there is mental health issues amongst musicians. So I knew kind of once they come back that there was something here that was worth further exploration. And even though I can't fully explore it within this mod 6, I think I was hopefully with the second stage able to just find some ideas of why maybe, and what we could do on a lower level through coaching to ensure that people have support.
Yeah. And so how many responses did you have in the end? Because just musing over the fact that earlier you said you didn't want to do any sort of quantitative study, then you've actually done it's exactly what you did.
It got out of hand.
It was a mixed methods. Just go die. I love the way our students just go, yeah, just give me mixed methods, bring it on.
I know. Well, I figured, so again, through my research, there was a lot of quantitative, it was a lot of mixed method research. So I figured if I was going to stay in the same lane as a lot of my peers ahead of me, I kind of needed to echo the kind of framework that is the standard has been set, So I wanted to do a small element of quantitative research. I mean, one of the reasons was to tick a box, I guess, make sure that I was adding a bit more more methodologies into my study, but also, and in hindsight, it definitely supported and helped me when it came to my qualitative research, because I was able to actually look at graphs and things like that. So it was a small kind of quantitative element, but I think it was really helpful in the end, even though that took me way longer to figure out how to do efficiently than the qualitative stuff. And actually, kind of from my mod 3, I also did a mixed methods study that was in a similar vein, but of a completely different topic. And it was the same this time, is that the mental health element, so the mental health issues that has been documented in a lot of the literature that musicians are facing, a lot of it is sitting around 70%, which is wild. Around 70% of working musicians experiencing mental health issues. And even worse, like working musicians being 4 times more likely to struggle with suicidal ideation, and with most of them, I think about 30% after lockdown just ready to completely leave the job entirely. And in both the studies that I did and as part of this master's program, it came out around 70 or above percent when it came to the mental health element. And I think I've looked into a lot of reasons why, like I said, passion, burnout. But I think with identity, this study really shone a light on how identity is so tied to our mental health in general. And through this study, I think I was able to see why the challenges of being a working musician might ensure that people, encounter mental health issues a little bit of a higher frequency. But I think I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, I think I had 19 or 20 respondents to the original the call out for people online to fill in the questionnaire, which was hard to to kind of get people, because I work with professional musicians, professional singers. I almost, I do explain this as part of my assignment, but I didn't ask any of the people that I work with. So I didn't send out to anyone that I work with, just because I really wanted to, with it being mental health and identity and things like that, I didn't want to cross-pollinate with my students. And anyone that works as a vocal coach knows that it's very vulnerable. You create an environment for people to be very vulnerable. And I didn't want to use any of my clients as participants, because although it's fully anonymized, people might feel like they need to, I guess, kind of back up what they've already told me, or things might come out in that would show who they were and things like that. So I didn't intentionally target any of my own clients, so it meant that I had to go online into groups, and it's notoriously hard to get people to respond to questionnaires, even if they're nice and short.
And it's brave of you to move beyond your own sort of convenience sample, isn't it? And now moving away from those insider research issues, which I think is sometimes attributed to maybe the negative side of practitioner research. So it's great that you did that. And you obviously got, for it's a tiny small scale project done over what, 8 months, including your ethics clearance and all of that. So you've actually got not a bad sample size, really. So just in terms of your key findings then, and how that then relates to where we move on from here. So I guess conclusions, really. What were your main conclusions?
So my project went in a wild kind of way, and I'll explain why. So initially we did the kind of questionnaire. So I sent the questionnaire and I had quite a few feedback, and then anyone that left their email, I sent them an email, as we do, to kind of request further involvement. And I only got 3 people that kind of were happy to be interviewed on Zoom. And I thought that's fine. I was doing IPA, kind of qualitative analysis. It's so strange because you sit and do this all on your own and you never say the words out loud. You're always typing them and writing them down. So I was doing this IPA, and I knew that 3 would be enough. So my participant pool, I was like, that's okay, as long as I do some nice rich interviews and kind of get some rich data, and then I can. So I had my 3. 2 were instrumentalists and 1 was a vocalist, and they were all working musicians. So when I came to do my interviews, one of my participants kind of just off the cuff said, well, in my day job, and I was thinking, kind of, the inclusion was that you worked majority of your time as a musician, and this participant didn't. So whilst they worked a lot as a musician, they also had quite a high ranking job. So that worried me at first, because I thought, I don't have many participants and I'm going to have to stick with these three participants. And obviously I've found the literature to support the fact that, despite the fact that they weren't in the inclusion criteria, I wanted to include them anyway. But it actually changed the whole conclusion for me and the findings, because this participant happened to be the only one that scored really high on the psychological well-being scale. And when going through their interview, they were definitely foreclosed. So when we again talk about this foreclosed identity, it's kind of being encouraged into an identity from quite early. And this musician was raised by two musicians who were both in the Halle Orchestra. They both were kind of really high, really incredible, at different times of, in their generation, they were like really high level and taught and did all these things. And they raised him as a musician, and he was really put through grades on multiple different instruments, and now works with, in a lot of music. So they were kind of ticking every single box as what we would on the literature would say was foreclosure, but they scored really, really high on this psychological well-being scale. And when I kind of went through the interviews and went over everything, everything else was kind of matching what my other participants in terms of the upbringing. The only difference was they weren't financially dependent on this as a job, and so they were quite clear about the fact that they wouldn't do work if they didn't get paid enough, because they didn't need the money. And they really called themselves a musician, and that was their whole identity. And this other job, they kind of gave me some incredible insight into this other job. They just had to deal with the fact that they were a musician, and if he prioritized his musicianship, but financially he was relying on his job. So when it came back, that was the main difference. And so it allowed me to look into this idea of financial dependence and on an identity, and how that is kind of the crux of the the whole, or possibly, I guess it's something that I suggested could be the whole point, I guess.
What about the fact, because you said earlier that he was quite high ranking, so was his day job quite prestigious? Did that give him a lot of esteem?
Yes. So yeah, he was like a chairman. So
Right.
which meant that he was also quite able to take time away, and it didn't affect he could go and do music work, and he could just pull out of work. He was in quite a high level job, and he credits that to the fact that he's almost not happy about that. He talks in the project, there's a lot of comments about how he was put off being a musician because he was told that it was so, he had to have his grade 8 in everything, and basically the bar was so high in musicianship because of his upbringing, because he had such talented parents, that he just rejected it in the end. So he's still a musician, but he basically like went the other way. So whilst everything was leaning on this idea of identity foreclosure, he didn't follow it in, he kept it as his identity, but for his work, he was so secure in his identity as a musician that he just went and kind of achieved a lot in this other area of work. So you know, it's almost like the foreclosure was so, the identity was pushed on him so heavily that he knew he wouldn't hit the bar that he needed to in order to make a lot of money. And he remarks that he's really, you know, upset about that because his close friends, you know, went off and recorded with, you know, were on yachts with different people, and he was really mad about the fact that he didn't go on to study music. But I think it, you know, it looks like it probably was a good thing from my opinion, you know, because he does music all the time and is essentially a working musician, but he's just working all the time, doing different things.
Yeah. So, in terms of your conclusions, how's it changed your practice? Have you developed strategies around that?
Yeah, hugely. It's changed my practice a lot because, like I say, I had this kind of ethical dilemma in the sense that I teach young people at college and I teach professionals, and I have these young musicians who are so fired up, and it's always been my practice to build that in people. And you know, I didn't achieve my initial dream of being on the West End, but in my opinion, I did something that suits me way better. And now you know, and using those transferable skills of going to university and doing a theatre, you know, studying theatre and studying voice, I've been able to create a business for myself. So I'm always really kind of intentionally driving students to work really hard. And then after lockdown, working with professional students, I started to feel ethically like it was quite difficult because I would be pushing and encouraging these children to work for a job that I'm then trying to help someone deal with. So
How has all of this impacted your practice? Has it changed you?
yeah, it's changed me massively, and the way that I teach. Um, I think because I had this kind of ethical dilemma of teaching young adults in college, and then I was working with professionals, and you know, my whole teaching methodology has always, you know, for over a decade has been about inspiring passion and trying to get you know, telling people that they can create a career out of music, and you know, I did it, and I followed my passion and managed to, you know, kind of live a life that I really enjoy and run a business and work with people that I really enjoy. Um, but then I was working with these young artists, and then working with professional singers and seeing that it's really hard, right? So, you know, and it's draining, and although I knew that, I kind of just have always worked on this idea of work hard and you know, follow your passion. And so going through this whole program has really made me learn that it's not that easy. And actually we need to be more mindful when teaching young people. But I think the magic word and the thing that has come out of this for me, and what I'm teaching and being more mindful with now is resilience. So I think everything that I've looked at is about being resilient. And certainly this last project for me, um, it kind of proves that if we are, you know, if we're so determined that we're going to do this, you know, specific job, then likelihood is we're going to get challenged, and if we don't move and kind of ebb and flow with it, then we're going to struggle. And my own story is that I wanted to be on the West End, right? That was going to be what I did, and I put everything into that. But I think it was only with resilience and going to auditions and realizing that actually this isn't for me. You know, I'm a singer, but this isn't my path, and I need to change and figure out a different way. And then I started coaching, and now it's, oh, my dog. Now it's arguably, I believe, you know, it's definitely a better path for me. So I think now I teach with a focus on resilience. So I teach my kids, my singers, young singers, about diversity in the job, and you know, being so strong and so passionate about what you want to do, but knowing that there will be challenges to that, and it's not reflective of talent, and it's not reflective of you as a person. And if you lose your voice for before a show, then it's okay to cancel it. It doesn't mean everything's over. You just take a step back. So I built my, kind of rebuilt a lot of my methodology in my teaching for my my younger students, but also for my professional students, around resilience coaching, and trying to kind of help in my own way people avoid or help heal like mental health challenges, and just kind of, I guess, trying to be a bit of an example, I think. And I think noticing through this that it wasn't that I was so determined that I was going to be a singer that I ended up here, because actually I was never going to be a coach ever. I just kind of was, I think, resilient, and realized that certain areas of the lifestyle I wanted weren't for me, and it's okay to not achieve the goal that I said that I was going to achieve, when I was in year 10 and I was in the School Musical, and I was like, I'm going to be on the West End. I think luckily I didn't remain so tied to that I pushed through every single obstacle and just got tired. So I think that's what I teach now, is like, have that goal. But maybe, if it's a brick wall, maybe just figure out a way around it rather than trying to charge right through it. Because I think it's a balance. Passion is a driver and is the reason a lot of people achieve things. But at the same time, I think, based on my own research, that it can be quite a mental health challenge to just be driven by passion without having some sort of resilience underneath it.
Absolutely. Well, it's fantastic work. What next?
I don't know. I'm trying.
Having a rest.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a. Well,
No more mixed methods.
I'm not gonna look at any more numbers ever. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna try and. I do want to share a lot of the research that I've done over the past 3 years, because, like I said, I've managed to do everything kind of is lingering around burnout. So I'm full of information about that I would love to kind of look more into and create something that might be able to pass on, just as like a lot of my mentors have done for me throughout this program and other programs. So I do want to kind of do that, but I also don't want to type ever again, ever. I just want to sing and play my piano. So yeah, I don't know. I think, unfortunately, the thing about me is, as soon as I get comfortable, I have to make life uncomfortable again. So I'm sure I'll do something that is gonna challenge me again, that to move forward based around academia, maybe.
Yeah, good to hear it, because you're a brilliant academic. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.